Warning, the vlog you are about to see was filmed over a period of days. Alright, so I had to film this immediately because, as you can see, I have tear marks because I just started crying because I am 4 chapters away from finishing this book. It is such an emotional moment for me, and I don't really know how else to describe it other than pure elation. I have not finished a book project in my adult life, ever. I finished one when I was about 13 years old, but in my adult life, never. And I'll be 30 this year, and I'm on the precipice of finishing this book, this first draft of this book. And I'm so happy. I now, because of coronavirus and everything is shut down, I can't really work. So I have nothing but time to work on my other work. Yeah, wow. When it's done, because I suspect it'll be done within 2 weeks, maybe even shorter, because it just depends. But when it's done, you will know, because there will be a big video about that. So this is a video from the past, talking to my future self when it's done and I make the official vlog for actually finishing. Yeah, I'm in my bonnet. I don't have any moisturizer or makeup on or anything. It's just me in my bathroom recording because my roommates are making tacos and playing music out there. But anyway, yeah. Wow. It's been about a year since I last posted any updates on my YA fantasy novel that I've been working on for the past few years. And it picked up in steam as we entered 2020. And a lot has happened since I made that video.
Hold up.
So if you wonder where you weave or your fashion over fucking packages have arrived, guess what, bitch?
I was extremely stressed out. I was financially strapped. And in my personal life, I had come off of a performance season. You know, I was in an opera last summer, and then fall hit, and finding work was very difficult, and I had no energy to write anything. And so I put that project away. I got a lot done in November, and then I stopped and started, and then I ended up having to move. And moving took a lot of money, it took a lot of time, it took a lot of energy. And I moved, and I'm living in this lovely new place with 2 of my best friends and a cat. And it's really been good so far for my mental health. And once I was settled in around the beginning of in the mid to late December, that's when I started feeling like, okay, I need to actually get back into working on my fantasy novel as much as possible. And things were going fine until Sister Rona came and knocked out all of my job prospects again, because I work in the performance industry, and the performance industry right now is shut down. So, being stuck here in the house, it forced me to just tell myself it's now or never. Now it was a bit of a blessing in disguise. I mean, the situation sucked, but when March hit, and also I live in New York City, which is an epicenter of COVID-19. So when March hit, I was like, well, I have nothing but time. I'm not answerable to anybody right now, and I'm sitting in the house, so I need to take advantage of this time and try and get something done. And I went in for about at least 4 to 5 weeks of writing every single day, just trying to get this draft out. And then at the end of April, I just was so tired, drained, and then for an entire month I didn't touch it. And then I came back at the end of May, and I realized that I was so close to the finish line that the break was so necessary for me to rejuvenate what needed to be rejuvenated. So that month break during quarantine was a really good thing for me. And on June 3rd, 2020, I finished the rough draft of my novel. And here, well, I'm trying to, covering the title and my address, of course. And here it is. Here it is. All of it. 261 pages of work. And I just can't wait to... Why am I looking up there? I just can't wait to get into it. So, my novel is an epic folkloric fantasy set in the 19th century. It's an original fairy tale rooted in Black Southern folklore and mythology, and it takes place in a hidden country of mystical beings that live on the edge between slavery and freedom. To go more in depth into my novel, for so long it's been such a private story, and I'm a very superstitious person, so I haven't been willing at all to share any specific details of characters and plot and character journeys. I won't even share the title, but the whole time while working on this project, the Vine book has been a perfect decoy title. And the title on the front cover of the printed manuscript isn't even the actual title. It's just something that ties the book's two main characters together. So let's talk about that. My two leading characters are a princess and a fairy. And the fairy world is a big part of the story too. And to get a little magical and historical, for those of you who are familiar with my African American folklore series and have looked at my video on fairies, you'll know that fairies in African American folklore are not spoken of enough, and some don't even really believe they exist in our traditional stories. But that's not true, and I got very inspired by the idea of African fairies having a hand in shaping human history in some way, and so I've spent years creating a fairy society based on stories I'd originally read from other authors through history, with my own imaginative spin put on things, for good measure. Let's talk about what my fairies are. My fairies take influence from the folktale Mum Bet and the Little Ones Glowing by Virginia Hamilton, who appear in her book, Her Stories, African American Folktales, Fairy Tales, and True Tales, as tiny beings bringing light and cheer to the characters of Mum Bet and Jody, two black people who live in a setting inspired by the rural South and who live in a world where innocence, beauty, and purity are denied them. But my imagination stretched a little further than that. I asked myself questions like about what it would be like if these black fairies were small to human eyes, but much taller and much more radiant in their own world. What if groups of sorcerers escaped slavery and founded a secret kingdom that had ties to these fairies? What about the societies of African fairies in real-world mythology? The Abattoir, the Aziza, the Muatia, the Yumbos, and how would black fairies on the other side of the Atlantic be connected to them? How would they appear, and what forms would they take? The more questions I asked myself, the deeper my curiosity went, and it resulted in 7 years of world building and crafting short stories based on this growing concept. With characters at center stage, we don't normally get to see it all in fantasy, especially fantasy that deals with fairies. I take a very serious and vested interest in making sure that just because I'm writing something in a story, that just because it's fictional does not mean I get to trample all over the real world experiences of cultures that have sacred ideals and philosophies that are already treated as though they're not worth protecting in the real world. We see this a lot with fantasy when it takes concepts from existing cosmologies and existing cultures and either bastardizes them or makes them out to be a joke. I'm not going to name names of people, but you know who. We've seen this happen many times in recent years. But anyway, enough about that. But also because I am within the culture that I'm writing about specifically, that also still doesn't give me license to go in and, make a mockery of the beliefs of my ancestors and the world that my people live in. So everything is done from a place of respect, from a place of honor, and from a place of exploration and discovery. Not a place of ownership and not a place of subjugation and controlling the narrative. So originally, this was written as a fantasy novel in verse. I had never written a novel in verse before, so it was my first time, and it lasted for about, I would say, the first quarter of the book. And then eventually I started realizing that there were things about the plot and the characters that needed to be stretched out in prose. So I changed it, and it's no longer a fantasy novel in verse. It is written in regular prose, but there are a lot of poems in it. And the unique nature of my book has been that this didn't start out as a book. It started out as an opera libretto, and then from its conception as an opera libretto. This was back in 2013. The story grew larger and larger and larger, and then this entire world was developed around my characters, and it took on a life of its own. And then I realized that there were just things about the story that needed to be fleshed out, and the libretto just was not enough. It wasn't enough time there isn't enough time in a staged production to go that deep into too many things. So there are things you can do with a novel you can't do with the stage work, and there are things you can do with the stage work that you can't do with a novel, and there are things you can do with the movie you can't do with a novel, things you do with a novel you can't do with a movie. And all of those different mediums have their strengths and weaknesses. So when I decided it should become a novel, that was about 2018. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what I was doing. I was already in the middle of another novel, because I was working on two novels at the same time, set in the same world, but about 200 years apart, and they have nothing to do with each other. But this one needed to be completed first. So I put that other novel project aside, and then I picked up this one, which I'm calling The Vine Book, because the actual title I'm not going to reveal until it's done, because I'm superstitious about those things. With this particular project, it had to be done first for many reasons. One being that this was... Okay. This project here is 7 years of work in one document, and also it was one of the last things that my mother saw of my creative life before she passed away in 2017, and I also based one of my characters on her while she was still alive before she got sick. So I had to finish this book first. it just felt wrong to work on anything else. This is the thing that was calling to me the most. And now that it's done, it feels like a weight lifted. It feels like I did my duty. And it is a rough draft. It is not perfect by any means. And when I say rough, I mean, some people call it zero drafting. I guess you could call it zero draft because there are incomplete scenes. I've skipped over a few things. But the structure of it from start to finish is there. And I also write out of order. One day we'll talk about the in-depth, the nitty-gritty of my process. Because I write out of order, I had to restructure so many parts of the chapters. And then eventually I stopped caring about the form and I just basically barfed this book out onto my Word document. And yeah, I'm really happy. I'm really happy with it right now. I know that'll probably change when I go through this and do my first round of revisions. I have 3 friends who have agreed to proofread and beta read for me. And those of you who are watching this video, you know you are. I love you and I thank you. The only other person aside from me that's gonna read this is gonna be my grandmother, because my grandmother, who is 94 now, she said, I want to see what you're writing. So I also had to finish it for her as well. I was like, okay, I need to get this done. So, and because my grandmother hasn't really read any of my writing since I was a teenager. So, and I'm going to be 30 in October. So it's been a while. So it's really important. It was really important to me that I get this book done and I'm holding it in my hands. I know one day when it's published, I'm going to feel 10,000 times better. But this is the closest thing I have right now. And I'm going to take a little break from it. That's my plan. About maybe I'm gonna give myself 2 weeks. I'm not gonna read it. I'm not gonna look at it. I'm touching it now, which is dangerous because I kind of want to start going through it, but we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that. In 2020, we don't do those things. I'm gonna give myself 2 weeks break from this project, maybe 3 weeks. And in the interim, I'm going to work on my second project, which I'm calling the Fig Book. And that's actually going really well because a lot of that has already been written. I just took a break from it to work on the Vine book. Oh, the title. All right, folks, it's time for me to sign off and get to work. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can know when I make more uploads to this channel. Stay magical. Peace, beloveds.